Welcome back to Heroic Book Adventures. I'm Steve, and today we're going to take a look at Jean M. Auel's Earth's Children series. Now, I read this because a friend of mine recommended me The Clan of the Cave Bear. I live off-grid, and I'm really into like the old ways of how people used to do things to survive, so he thought this was something that I would like. And he was right. I really did enjoy it. It's set in prehistoric times, like before the last ice age, where the Neanderthals were in the last of their final days before extinction. So we follow a 5-year-old girl named Ayla, who gets separated from her family and people through a natural disaster. She ends up wandering the wilderness for a week and nearly dies before a group of Neanderthals comes upon her, and one of the women decides to take her in as her own. So the entire story is about Ayla's childhood and then rising into young adulthood and the struggles that she has in this very foreign culture, because not only does she have physical differences to them, being that she's a cro-magnon, kind of like us modern humans, but there's also mental differences, how their brains process things differently from ours and such. So there's all kinds of challenges and things, it's she has to find a way using her wit and cleverness to survive in a harsh world that she's born into. So it's a really cool one. I'd give this an 8. I really enjoyed it. When you go into the second book, The Valley of Horses, um, Ayla is now a woman, and she's going off to find the others, her people. So it kind of gets divided into two separate storylines throughout the book. You have Ayla's story arc, and then you have a second one that follows two brothers who are traveling across the continent. So the main brother, Jondalar, is, of course, tall and good looking. And every village they come across, every time there's a young woman there, he's hitting that. All the women are in the village are always talking about how well hung he is and how good in bed he is, which I was like, wow, the sex scenes in this are extremely detailed. Like they will get like 6 full pages with every little thing that's going on. I did not expect that. Yeah, you expect there to be sex scenes because obviously there's primitive peoples. They got nothing better to do with their time. So, of course, they're going to be bumping uglies because that's just what people do. But just the extreme detail made me feel like the sex scenes in this series were really like straight up erotica. Okay. So through it, you see Ayla's traveling this way while this super giga Chad that's packing the hammer of Thor is traveling this way, and you just know they're gonna meet up and fall in love. But that's really not a spoiler because right from the very beginning of the book, like anybody with an IQ above room temperature can see exactly where the book's going to head. And it even tells you like right on the back of the book that that's what happened. So I got to acknowledge that I'm probably not the target audience for the direction this series took, but I tried to be objective about it and say that the second book was a pretty decent one. Ayla's story arc, I would give an 8, just like the first book. And then Jondalar and his brother's arc, maybe like a 6. So average out to a 7. So it was an okay book. If you like the idea of this story and would like to check it out, what I would recommend if I were me is to read the first 2 books, Clan of the Cave Bear and The Valley of Horses, and just leave it at that, okay? That gives you a solid conclusion. You can just see, okay, Ayla's going to meet her people, the others, right off on her horse whinny into the sunset. Everybody lives happily ever after, and you can just pretend like the rest of these books don't exist. Because they really turn into romance and drama the rest of the time. So what does every romance need? A love triangle. So guess what the main plot point of the Mammoth Hunters is? Yep, a love triangle. At least it was done in a kind of interesting way, because it was all like a big misunderstanding. Because you see, this dude proposes to get it on with Ayla. Well, she does not know that amongst the others, she has the option to turn him down and say no. Because back when she lived with the clan, the way it was handled was whenever a male felt a need to relieve his needs, he would give the signal, and a woman had to assume the position, and that was that. So this guy propositions her, and she's like, okay, do what you got to do, because that's just what she was always taught was the proper way of doing things. Well, then when Jondalar finds out that this other dude threw Ayla the pipe, now he's all broken-hearted, like, oh, she doesn't love me anymore, and he distances himself from her. Well, Ayla doesn't understand why he's distancing himself, why he doesn't love me anymore. And okay, so it was somewhat interesting, except that it drags on for 700 freaking pages. And even when it comes to an end, it gets towards the conclusion, and they talk it out, and they're like, oh, I really love you, and yeah, I really love you too. And they're like, okay, we're cool again, and then just carry on with their journey. And I was just like, what? Like, that's really how you ended that? Wow. So books 4 and 5, The Plains of Passage and The Shelters of Stone, Ayla and Jondalar are traveling across the continent to get back to Jondalar's people. These two books together total over 1,500 pages. And yet, I feel like the two of them could have been combined into just one book of maybe 300 pages. That's not good. The events in these were unmemorable and boring. I would say that books 3, 4, and 5, I would give a 4 out of 10 to. And I think I'm being a little bit generous. These felt like a one-hit wonder author just writing for a paycheck. Like she was just trying to capitalize on the popularity of her one excellent character that just struck a chord with audiences. And she will, nobody will read this and not fall in love with Ayla. She's just an incredible character that just drove the whole story. But just when you think this series can't get any worse, we get to the 6th and final book, The Land of Painted Caves. Now, the first 2/3 of this book are spent with Jondalar's people showing Ayla around these caves with wall paintings on them, old cave paintings. And I think it's meant to evoke a sense of wonder, like, oh, wow, this is so amazing. But when this tour should have been handled in 30 pages, but was instead dragged on for hundreds of pages, it just felt tedious and boring. And even when you get to the end of the book, we get the final reveal of the series, okay? Now, this amazing final reveal is something that you, the reader, knew from the very beginning of the first book. It was just extremely, it was a letdown. I couldn't believe it. And it wasn't even expanded upon. Like when the people found out this big reveal, they weren't like, oh, okay, this is how this is going to change our civilization. This is how we're going to have to do things from now on. This is how our lives are going to be changed or whatever. No, the big reveal is dropped and everybody's like, oh, wow, that's crazy. And then it just ends and that's it. Now, I'm not somebody that holds it against a book just because it doesn't end the way that I want it to. I like to think that I'm mature enough to understand that the world doesn't work the way I want it to. So I'm not going to hold it against a book just because it ends differently. But that's not it. This was just, the way it was handled was just poorly written. Okay? This last book was a 2 out of 10. I just, I can't believe this was probably the worst ending to a series that I have ever seen. And I'm just glad that I was not one of these people that was reading these books as they were coming out. Because if I had to wait 10 years in between books just to have this turd dropped onto me, I would have been pissed. So if you enjoy reading thousands of pages of just people's drama between each other, you will probably enjoy this series a lot more than I did. But if you're looking for just a good story, like I said, I would recommend just reading the first 2 books, The Clan of the Cave Bear and The Valley of Horses, and just sparing yourself the agony of the rest of the series. So I will see you well endowed heroes on our next caveman adventure.